What is up, guys? Rick Kakis here, and today we wonder how people actually complain that that intro is long. What is that, like 5 seconds? Come on, guys! But really today, this is the last day of Season 4 of Destiny 2, the Season of the Outlaw, and I wanted to look back at the season, really talk about the things Bungie did right and what they can do even more of coming in the next season, but also the things that Bungie didn't do so right. This is the most pivotal season of Destiny 2, the most important season of Destiny 2. Before Season 4, Destiny 2 was, a dying, if not kind of a dead game, and Season 4 and the release of Forsaken turned the entire ship around. So this is going to be such an important time to look back and reflect at the things that should be done more of and shouldn't be done and stuff like that, especially since so much content and so many changes were thrown at us at once. It is important to kind of break apart all those changes and really talk about, okay, well, this worked, but this really didn't, and this little thing caused more problems than we were expecting, and all of that stuff. So let's just start where it started in Season 4, because tomorrow, Season 5 will technically start, but the expansion is not coming out until 1 week from tomorrow. The same exact thing happened when Season 4 launched. It was a week period before Forsaken came out, even though Season 4 had technically started. And the big change within that week was definitely the new weapon system. Being able to equip technically 3 shotguns if you have an exotic heavy shotgun with the Legend of Acreus, but having access to special weapons yet again instead of just having 2 primary weapons and then 1 power weapon. This fundamentally changed Destiny 2 in a way that, frankly, no other change in Season 4 really did. The question will definitely loom over Bungie's head: would Forsaken have been as successful as it was if these weapon changes weren't made? And that's a really interesting question, right? If Forsaken came, introduced all the stuff it did, random weapon rolls are back, all of that stuff, but the weapon system didn't change, it was still 2 primaries and a heavy, would Forsaken have still turned the ship around? And that's a question, we can't necessarily answer. But these weapon changes really brought the power back to the hands of Guardians in Destiny 2, both in PvE and in PvP. I mean, in PvE, the fact that you can now run, a primary weapon, and then the escalation shotgun, and then on top of that, the Thunderlord now, or the Sleeper Simulant. I mean, before, you were choosing the Sleeper Simulant or the escalation shotgun. So being able to have both now, that is such an incredible increase in your power, in your damage output, all of that stuff in PvE, that, your Guardian feels so much more powerful, so much more lethal than he did before those changes went live. And in PvP as well. I mean, being able to have access to sniper or shotgun or fusion rifle ammunition right off the bat with every spawn, that is, again, such an increase in power. And being able to have access to a shotgun and also the Wardcliff coil, in this case, that's again increasing the lethality of your Guardian in the Crucible so much. However, with these changes, and essentially which was really just reverting to the Destiny 1 changes, the fact that you can have 2 specials feels more like a gimmick than anything else, because no one ever runs 2 specials in a practical sense. You never really see someone in the Crucible running a sniper and a shotgun. You just don't, because of the ammo economy. Same with PvE. It's just not that viable. You'll run out of ammo. You need a primary to have that consistency. So essentially what it boils down to is that you can have energy primaries or kinetic primaries and then kinetic or energy specials, and you can flip the slots around in those different things. And that is an interesting question. Do you want to be taking shields out with a primary weapon that's a lot more consistent, will basically always have ammo, or with a special weapon that's going to do a lot more damage? That's really the most in-depth that this kind of new style of weapon system has gone. But aside from that, again, it's really just reverting to the Destiny 1 system of primary, special, heavy. But it's kind of funny that with the arrival of essentially the Destiny 1 weapon system, we also had the arrival of the exact same problems we were having in Destiny 1. I mean, the second these weapon changes occurred in the Crucible, you already got people complaining about shotgun apes, right? We were complaining about shotgun apes for 3 years in Destiny 1, and here they are again in Destiny 2, right? You just constantly hear people complaining about special weapons in PvP. And so it's, kind of understandable that Bungie wanted to do away with that system. Turns out, however, the downsides definitely outweighed the positives of this system, and that's why we see it reverted. However, I will say that, throughout this season, there's always been kind of the boogeyman's in PvP, or I should say the boogeymen in PvP with special weapons. Yes, you hear people complaining about shotgun apes, and it is very annoying that when you see someone spawn and they switch to a shotgun. Like, that's the first thing they do. They don't even think. It's just spawn, shotgun, charge. And the sad thing is that works out for them a surprisingly large amount of the time. But you'll also see people complain about the Telesto, and you'll also see people complain about grenade launcher spam, and you'll also see people complain about the wave splitter especially. So there are definitely multiple special weapons kind of vying for the top PvP slot. You can definitely argue about which ones are slightly better than the others, but it's not like shotguns are so clearly the right answer for every engagement because, again, the Telesto and other things do exist. So I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be, but I would like the primaries to be buffed, especially SMGs. Why are the close range options for a primary gun not good enough at gunning down people with shotguns charging at you? Like, you could end the apes in just one simple SMG buff. But speaking of buffs, it was really interesting to see the meta evolve over Season 4 with this new weapon system. Like, to see kind of the builds arrive and then kind of die and the new ones emerge. Definitely sniper rifles were being used quite a bit, I think, in PvE right off the bat, and then those kind of started to die as people realized, wait, an escalation shotgun is going to output like way more damage than any sniper, and then you kind of saw really the emergence of what I would say is the best, not really best, but most used, most common PvE build in terms of weaponry, which is just, a primary weapon, escalation shotgun, or some kind of like full auto shotgun, and then just, the sleeper simulant, sometimes the whisper. Like, that is definitely what you see a lot of the time, the sleeper or the whisper for killing the bosses, and then of course the shotgun for killing all those mid-range ads you find throughout the striker or whatever you're doing, and then primary for consistency. I would love to see some changes introduced with Season 5 in terms of just straight balancing, so that we do see definitely maybe a little bit more snipers in that special slot. Really would love to see more fusion rifles. Fusion rifles got a buff kind of recently of like 15%. They still lag behind pretty far. The escalation shotgun honestly kind of causes problems in PvE because it's so clearly the best option for like 99% of the content you're doing that I think it needs some rivals pretty badly, and it's going to be really interesting to see what Black Armory brings. Like, there's rumors of a whole new gun rarity with black weapons and stuff like that. Perhaps they could actually rival the escalation shotgun. We could see some more variety in PvE. In PvP, there's definitely a meta evolving, but like I said before, there's still some definite options of what you can use, and I think there's a little bit more variety in PvP, honestly, than there is in PvE, except for hand cannons. Once you get the Lunas or the Not Forgotten, that's all you use. Anyways, that's kind of the evolution of the guns, of the new weapon system over Season 4. But what about the process of playing through Season 4 and the leveling system and so on? Well, it all started with Forsaken. That's just the massive content drop, so much content right off the bat, and we had the launch of the raid about a week and a half later. In fact, that period of time between when Forsaken launched and when the raid came out is just the best, most focused period that we have for assessing the new leveling system. Leveling was changed dramatically with Forsaken, and it's going to become an issue yet again as soon as Black Armory launches and you have to level up again. It's still an issue right now for anyone who isn't 600 power. So, over the course of Season 4, how was the leveling system? What are changes that can be made? Well, again, in that period, that's when people are leveling the most ferociously, was to get raid ready. We definitely saw all of the flaws of this leveling system emerge. Number one, the massive dependence on RNG. Leveling being slowed is a good thing. Like, you don't want people to race through the content and be raid ready in 2 days after Forsaken's launch. That's an obvious thing. Pretty much everyone agrees with that. So Bungie made it a lot more difficult to level up. Those are all good things. But when you have just massive RNG, you do have some problems. For example, you know, you could be doing your powerful gear and you could be at a position where you're saying to yourself, okay, if I get anything other than gauntlets, I will level up dramatically. You know, if I get legs, my legs are really lagging behind. If I get a powerful gear leg drop, I'm going to go up like 5 power levels. It's going to be amazing. Anything but gauntlets and I'm good to go. And then you get gauntlets. And then you get gauntlets again. And then if you get gauntlets a third time, you're screwed. Your entire day of grinding is ruined. That is insanely problematic. I really don't like that factor where if you just, by just random circumstances of RNG, you just get the bad drop like 2 or 3 times in a row, you are falling so far behind. It's really, really a struggle to then get raid ready or to then get ready for whatever the endgame content is. And I would hope that the one change Bungie would make is constant progression. So if you have gauntlets and you're thinking to yourself, you know, anything but gauntlets, and you get gauntlets again, it should be just 1 light level higher. Everything should always be at least 1 light level higher. It's not going to advance you that crazily. You're still going to be mad, but it's not going to be literally useless. You'll still climb a tiny bit, and that frankly would alleviate a lot of the problems. Because if you get gauntlets 3 times in a row, you've gone up 3 light levels in gauntlets, which is better than literally nothing. And I really do hope they've addressed this issue, because when Black Armory launches, if Bungie goes back to the cycle of 3 days after launch before the raid layer comes out, like, those problems of RNG are going to be hilariously obvious. Like, it's going to be scary obvious. If you get 2 bad drops, you're screwed, you're not raid ready. Like, think about how crazy that is. So I really hope there's a little bit more of a buffer zone between when Black Armory launches and when this raid layer comes out. Because otherwise, you know, it's going to be, you know, people are going to be totally screwed out of a raid run because they got legs twice in a row. And that is just not a good sign. So we've gone through the weapon system changes and the leveling system changes, but what about the actual content drops? Well, again, the brunt of the content arrived at Forsaken's launch. We got a bunch of new strikes, new maps, just a bunch new stuff to do, a new campaign, all of that stuff. And then there was definitely a trickling out process, especially when you look at the evolution of the Dreaming City, where every week there's new stuff to do. Every single week in the Dreaming City, it's a random Ascendant challenge. Well, sorry, not random, but a rotating Ascendant challenge out of 6. You've also got rotating bosses in the Blind Well, and you had the rolling out of content over those first 3 weeks into the final week of the height of the corruption. This was a huge week. It introduced a bunch more content, especially with the Shadowed Throne. It introduced the, you know, monster in Gambit, the meatball that you could actually fight and get the malfeasance, all of that stuff. So we didn't have everything with that first day, with September 4th. We definitely had a rolling out of content over time, and that combined with a slower leveling system did make sense. It was basically impossible. If they had launched everything on that first day, Shattered Throne, all this stuff, it would have been a little overwhelming, and the hardcore players would have sped through all of that stuff in the first couple of weeks, got pretty burned out, and, you know, the casual players just kind of playing catch up. Like, that's a little bit of a problem if you have things launched too quickly. The hardcore players, again, they do it and they get burned out and they leave, and then there's no one left to assist the casual players who haven't done that stuff yet. So the rolling out of content with Forsaken did feel appropriate, especially with the 3-week cycle of the corruption in the Dreaming City. Like, it felt like when the 3rd week arrived, it was the perfect time to introduce the Shadow Throne and all that stuff. Now, the fact that it then disappears is kind of another interesting question. Is that the right approach? Should Bungie just, once the height of the corruption is here and the Shadowed Throne dungeon arrives, just keep it around? Because if you're not ready on that 3rd week, but you're ready the 4th week, you've then got to wait like 2 more weeks before it arrives again. but it does create like kind of more of an event when it does arrive. You have that week period to do the Shadowed Throne. You see definitely an increase on your friends list of people logging on, trying to get that stuff done, trying to get the Malfeasance quest, all of that stuff. So there's definitely some, problems with that system, and then there's definitely some positives with that system as well. However, when it's not a height of the corruption week, you definitely do see the player base drop off. Like, you really do see not too many people logging on if it's like week 1 or 2, and I think that is from a lack of events. We had definitely a lack of events with Season 4. Whereas we'd usually have trials and faction rallies, like those were gone. We did have Iron Banner, but that was kind of it. And we also did have one seasonal event with the Festival of the Lost. Now, Festival of the Lost was actually a pretty darn decent free event. Like, they introduced a bunch of new cosmetic rewards, but it really didn't feel forced. It felt like you were getting the extra engrams for that event and being able to have access to those Halloween cosmetic items at a reasonable pace. Like, it didn't feel like you were forced to go buy silver at Eververse or anything like that. Also, it introduced a reasonable amount of content with the Haunted Forest. Like, that was actually pretty fun activity, diving deeper and deeper and deeper and all that stuff. Like, that was legitimately a pretty darn good, completely free event, and it blows out of the water the previous Festival of the Lost, jokingly called Festival of the Cost events. That kind of sets a new bar on what we'd like to see going forward with these events. And one of the most important things about that event is that it introduced practical loot with the horror story. Having a fully masterworked 600 power level auto rifle was super important for people to go after and grind. It's something that stays with you after the event is gone. Festival of the Lost and the Haunted Forest and all that stuff is not in the game anymore, but people are still using horror stories all over the place. It's something that really sticks with you. And I think that's super important to have with all of these, future free events, is actual loot, not just cosmetics, because that stuff, take it or leave it, it's not really going to have an impacting gameplay. Yes, you can show off a new emote, but when you're actually doing strikes or crucible, whatever, it doesn't matter. A weapon is something that has an actual impact on gameplay. It'll change the way you play potentially, and I really again want to see that going forward. In fact, I'd like to see Bungie take the pinnacle weapon approach, where they can have, the Dawning is coming up with Season 5, they can have a weapon with a unique perk that no other weapon has, similar to what we see with pinnacle weapons. But frankly, another sort of problem caused by the lack of these events, like no faction rallies and so on, was what somewhat felt, especially towards the end of Season 4, like a lack of desirable loot. You can only get so many tiger spites, if you guys know what I'm saying, and it was definitely missing that, okay, faction rallies is coming or trials is coming, and there's this pulse rifle that you gotta go after, it's so good. Like, there was definitely those weapons, but once you acquired them off the beginning of Season 4, it just stagnated. There wasn't that batch of new things introduced, halfway through, especially because the dungeon, when it was introduced, it's just Dreaming City loot. So that's another kind of thing. Again, the loot pool kind of stagnated definitely towards the second half of Season 4. So I do hope we get the return of those type of events, like faction rallies and what have you, or just other events, Arms Day, all that random stuff, in Season 5. We just need the loot pool kind of expanded upon at points during the season, not all at the beginning and then basically nothing else for the entire season. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Season 4, and it's already good to see Bungie learning from Season 4, it looks like, and improving upon it. I mean, the introduction of those pinnacle weapons for Gambit and for Vanguard are a very good idea. It didn't make sense that just the Crucible had kind of a pinnacle weapon with the Luna's Howl, and then beyond that with the Not Forgotten. What about these other aspects of the game? That was kind of the logical next question to ask. The fact that Bungie's already doing that, and that starts tomorrow, is a very good sign. Hopefully they improve even more going forward, and then Season 5, of course, going into Season 6, all of that stuff. Let's hope Bungie gets better and better and better. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, found this interesting, and if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCactus. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.